A number of young women and girls went missing in the 90s here in Ireland. The public began to panic, the guards began to worry, and they had to seriously consider, was there a serial killer in Ireland? On the 26th of March 1993, 26-year-old Annie McCarrick went missing while out walking in Glencullen. On the 9th of November 1995, 21-year-old Jojo Dullard went missing while hitching home to Kilkenny. On the 23rd of August 1996, 25-year-old Fiona Pender disappeared from her home in Tullamore. She was 7 months pregnant. On the 13th of February 1997, Ciara Breen disappeared after leaving her home in Dundalk during the night. She was just 17. On the 9th of February 1998, 19-year-old Fiona Sinnott was last seen leaving a pub in Wexford. Her daughter turned 1 the following month. And on the 28th of July 1998, 18-year-old Deirdre Jacob went missing outside her home in broad daylight in Kildare. So there hadn't really been much thought, so to speak, put into whether there could have been a connection between these disappearances up until Deirdre's. They were considered really, like a local issue, so each Garda station in that area was just investigating it. No one really considered that they were connected or that there could have been a serial killer. But after Deirdre's, there was widespread fear, and senior Garda actually did become concerned and thought, that they did have to look at the possibility that there was a connection. So Garda Commissioner Pat Byrne assembled a special team who would look at all the cases with fresh eyes to see if there was any new leads, to see if there was anything missed, and most importantly, to see if there was any connections. He told the media and the public not to expect miracles. He said, quote, "We have no bodies, which means we have no crime scene, and that in itself is a tremendous disadvantage. This is not about raising hope for the relations of these girls." Asked whether there could have been a serial killer involved, he said it was something that needed to be considered. So Pat Byrne basically placed Assistant Commissioner Tony Hickey in charge of a 6-member team, and he was allowed to pick what members he wanted on the team. Tony Hickey was actually led the investigation for Veronica Guerin's murder. I'm sure if you're Irish, you know what that is. If you don't, Veronica Guerin was an investigative journalist who was reporting on gangland figures, particularly John Gilligan. And she was shot dead in her car back in the 90s. So then Tony was allowed to pick his own people. So he chose, and I apologise because I'm going to read them off to make sure that I get them correct. So Superintendent Jerry O'Connell, he was going to be kind of overseeing the day-to-day operations, and he also worked on the Guerin investigation with Hickey. Then there was Inspector Mark Kerrigan, so he was a former murder squad officer. I spoke about them before in the Sean Evans video, I think. The murder squad was like a specific set of detectives who kind of worked on specific cases and stuff like that. There was Detective Sergeant Maura Walsh. She worked with the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation on Harcourt Street. There was Sergeant Pat Tracy. He actually worked on the disappearance of Philip Cairns. So again, if you don't know who Philip Cairns was, there are kind of 2 long-standing young children missing in Ireland. Mary Boyle is one who I covered, and Philip Cairns is the other one. So then obviously Pat Tracy has experience with disappearances and those type of investigations. Then there was Detective Garda Marion Cusack, and she worked in the National Drugs Unit. And then there was Detective Garda Alan Bailey, who I'm pretty sure I've mentioned before in the Grange Gorman murders. So he worked out of the Brideswell Garda Station. So again, back then they kind of answered all the big murders in Dublin, particularly in Dublin city centre and surrounding areas. So he had a lot of experience working in murder investigations. So between the 6 of them and Tony Hickey, they had decades and decades of experience. And Tony Hickey said that it would be, it would be equal. So their ranks would not matter unless it was in an official capacity. Their ranks would not matter. They were all equal, and they all must do the same equal work. So the name Operation Trace, TRACE. Mark Kerrigan came up with this. So it is trace, review and collate evidence. That's basically what it means. So for the investigation, the team were obviously going to need like a database, to put in the victims' details, any possible suspects, anything like that. So at that moment, the Garda didn't have one. So they decided to look at different countries and see what they had. So I'm just going to go through. So they basically, they went over to the UK and looked at the National Crime Facilities database in Bramhill, just outside London in the UK, and it was called Holmes, like Sherlock Holmes, and it was Home Office Large Major Inquiry System. And they also looked at the FBI, which I'm sure loads of you have heard before. So that's the VICAP, so Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. I'm sure if you've watched Criminal Minds and Law and Order, you've heard them talk about VICAP. And then they looked at Canada's serial killer database, and that was VICLAS, and that's Violent Crime Linkage Analysis System. So in the end, they decided to go with the Canada's one, VICLAS, but they created a new one based on that, and then they made adaptations. And so they called the Irish one, the Gardaí's one, OVID, so OVID. So it was Offenders, Victims and Incidents Database. So this database would have all known sexual or violent offenders. It would have any victims of these crimes, any attempted abductions. It would have any kind of violent incidents that were reported, and it would they would kind of include anyone who would be deemed like a sexual deviant. And so they looked back to the early 80s and included anyone from then up till 98 in it. So they looked at different things. So they looked at victimology. So they looked at the different women and girls who went missing, and they looked at what schools they went to, what sports they played and competed in, if they went to any of the same dance halls or discos, if they had, far relations connected to each other, any slight thing that they thought could connect one or more of them, and they didn't. Tony Hickey would actually say that they were looking for the same needle in 6 haystacks, and that's if the needle even existed. So another thing that they looked at was the geographic profiling. So a former detective inspector from the Canadian Police Force, Kim Rossmo, had come up with this. So it was basically the hunting habits, of African lions matched the predatory behaviour of serial killers. So as in they would look for weak prey, they would wait by the watering holes, for them to come to it. And so by this logic, they determined that the offenders would actually more likely commit their crimes closer to their home. Tony Hickey placed a photo of each of the 6 girls on the wall in the Naas Garda station. That's where they were based out of. And it was to remind the team of the human element of their investigation. He actually done this with Veronica Guerin's investigation as well. And so he had a picture of Veronica Guerin up to remind the team of the human element. So in September 1998, the team had their first official meeting in Naas Garda station. So at first, they basically just determined kind of each member's knowledge of each of the cases. And for the most part, obviously, it was really only kind of what they knew from, the media and stuff like that, which they deemed a good thing because it meant they were kind of able to go in, with fresh eyes and with an open mind, because none of them were involved in the original investigations. Then each of the 6 members would take one case, and that's who they investigated. And again, they were to investigate it as if the disappearance had just happened, and they were to go from there. Jerry O'Connell was decided to be the liaison officer, and Tony Hickey told them that there was to be no leaks made to the media or to other Gardaí, that it was any information obtained was to be strictly between the team, the Operation Trace team. So a conference was held with the original investigative teams to discuss, obviously, the original investigations, the current status of them, everything just about the case. All original documents were to be given over to the Trace team, and the families were to be updated on all developments in any case. Pat Byrne and Tony Hickey then held a media briefing for the public. There was a lot of media attention, both nationally and internationally. And the first couple of weeks were actually just spent like answering the phone tip lines. So apparently Annie McCarrick received more tips kind of than any of the other girls. I don't know if that was necessarily, was it because she was American, or, but even I was thinking, like an Irish brunette or an Irish blonde or whatever, might not stand out as much for you as but if you remember seeing like an American in a cafe or in a pub or whatever, you'd remember that more because she's American, especially, because it's, the accent and stuff would just pop out more. I was kind of thinking maybe that was probably the reason why she got more, just purely because it was more of a, novelty is not the right word, but you know what I mean. Within hours, the psychics were calling, saying that they knew this and knew that. And in Alan Bailey's book, Missing Presumed, he speaks about one man who rang and said that he had, quote, important information about a man he knew and the location of a body. And so obviously, like, they took everything, like they had to give everything some bit of, I don't know the word I'm trying to say there, sorry, but they had to deal with everything. They couldn't just dismiss things. And so anyway, so he said that he had important information. And so he arranged for two Gardai, two officers. I actually think it could have been detectives. The way he says it in the book, it makes it sound like it could have actually been two detectives off the team, or, two officers from the team. But I'm not sure because he doesn't name them. But he says that they arranged for them to go out and meet the man at his home, one of the evenings. And when they arrived, they walked into a seance. And apparently, not to be rude, they didn't leave right away. So, there was just a lot of kind of, there's more stories in the book as well about, different scenarios where people kind of took advantage of the Gardai in certain ways, So naturally, with such a big investigation, there's obviously going to be, hoax callers and time wasters and stuff like that. So there was a 44-year-old man from Fermanagh who rang and said that he believed he gave Deirdre Jacob a lift. And I believe he gave her a lift somewhere in Monaghan, which wasn't very far from Cavan. And apparently she had friends in Cavan, and the week before she went missing, she had actually been up there staying with them. So, like, there was, people believe, they thought this could be a decent lead. And then it turned out that he was lying. He had lost his daughter. I don't know how young his daughter was, but he had lost her in a traffic accident. So the Gardai don't believe that he was doing any of this he wasn't doing it to be malicious. Like, there was a woman who was already in prison who said that she had information, on where a body was. And she told them it was in Kerry. I think she even went with them, she was brought to Kerry to show them whatever areas, but nothing came from this. One of the biggest hoax callers that they had would happen in 7th of March 1999, when a call came into Wicklow Garda Station at around 2 a.m. And the man on the phone with a foreign accent asked to speak to the detective involved in the Operation Trace team. He would go on to say that he was calling from Quebec. I always think it's Quebec, but if I'm saying it wrong, sorry. Quebec in Canada. And that some years previously he had been in Ireland with a friend, Colin, and that they had abducted a woman who was out walking, and that they, assaulted her, raped her, and then murdered her. He would say that they beat her to death and then dumped her into a lake, weighed her down and dumped her into the lake. He says that when he returned to Canada, he was then arrested on, quote, trumped up charges, and he gave this Gardai a number for him to be called on, and said that he had further info, that he had photos and everything. And then a second voice came on to the call, like came in, in the background or whatever, said something in French, and then the call ended. So Alan Bailey, obviously, there was a big rush then. So Alan Bailey rang back, and he got through to a prison officer, because it turns out he was through to the Special Handling Unit of the Correctional Service of Canada in Quebec. When Bailey said to the officer that they had received a call from someone who said their name was Clifford Robert Olson, the prison officer said that he was an evil little man and that he was serving 11 life sentences. I think he then said something like, like do not trust him, basically. Something about like do not turn your back on him, but basically do not trust him. So just a little bit of information on Olson. He was deemed the Beast of British Columbia. He had raped and murdered 11 children and teenagers between November 80 to July 81, and their ages ranged from 9 to 18. They were both male and female, so he didn't seem to discriminate. And in the last month alone, in the July, he killed 5 of those. But apparently he has kind of hinted at the fact that he could have killed anywhere between 80 to 200 people. It's actually really crazy case. Obviously I don't cover Canadian cases, but if you wanted to look into him for more details, like it's wild. Like I read that he had abducted a teenager, let's say, and drugged her. She was in the boot, and stopped at the police station to go in and complain about like them harassing him, or they took his car, they took a different car or something. But he went in. This teenager is literally being, bound and gagged or whatever in his boot, drugged, and he is in the police station giving out about the police officers like annoying him, hounding him, because they're watching him or whatever, because he was obviously a suspect at this point. Like, it's just he seemed to be very, I don't know what the word is I'm trying to think of, but like the nerve. So then also another wild thing, there was a huge controversial deal because Olson basically said when he was caught that he would give up the location of the children and the teenagers. In return for each body that he gave, he wanted 10 grand put into an account for his wife and child. And so he even, like in a show of good faith, gave them one freebie, So he gave them one and then another 10. So they transferred 100 grand to an account for his wife and child. And there was a huge public outcry. So then it stopped. They wouldn't give him any more money. So then he didn't give any more bodies. So that's why they believe there is a lot more, and that's all he gave them. I can understand, especially for children, like you want your child home, you want to be able to bury your child and stuff, and maybe it's more serious that they need to get them home or something. But I've never heard of that money being given before. If you've heard of that, let me know the cases, because I just think that's wild that he was given that much money. I know he didn't get it, obviously, because he's in prison, but like even like that for your family to be given money like that, because like sure, if you write a book or something, you're not allowed to get any of the proceeds from it. Do you know what I mean? So I just think it's wild that they gave him 100 grand. But if you know any other cases like that, let me know. Sorry, and how he ended up calling was because, as one of his privileges for like that, giving up all the bodies, he got calls. He was allowed to make these type of calls, apparently. I think he was just allowed to use the phone whenever he wanted. So basically Bailey got through to like the prison warden or whatever, and they kind of were chatting a bit, but then they wouldn't really discuss any more about Olson without, like, because they didn't really know who they were talking to, so they wouldn't really discuss any more. So the Irish ambassador to Canada, Paul Dempsey, had to actually get involved and make arrangements and stuff like that for Alan Bailey to speak to Olson on the phone. So on the phone to Bailey then, the first thing he says to Bailey, and Alan Bailey kind of says that he felt a lot of disgust talking to him, because he so just like casually and matter-of-factly spoke about what he'd done and stuff like that. So the first thing he said, they were barely introduced, was, "I killed Carol Jordan. We took her, we enjoyed her, and we killed her slowly." And so when he was asked who's we, he said him and his friend Colin. So he apparently met Colin in prison over in Canada, and that when they were out or whatever, they then travelled to Ireland. And while staying in a hostel in Dublin, they met Canadian Carol Jordan, and they heard her, speaking about how she was going to Roundwood, which is in Wicklow, the following day to go down to like the lakes, whatever. So I think she might have hitched or something, but they arranged then to like get the bus and stuff like that there, and they kind of just waited near the lake or whatever that they knew she was going to, and just kind of waited it out until she was there. And then like that, they say that they abducted her, they raped her and stuff, and that when they were done, to put it in a horrible way, they beat her to death. They put her in her sleeping bag and then put rocks and stuff into the sleeping bag and threw it into the lake. Olsen has obviously been in prison since like 1981, and these disappearances are from the 90s. So Olsen isn't saying that he is responsible for them. He is saying that his mate, Colin, continued to come to Ireland hunting, and so that he would obviously then like relay the stories back to him, and that he would take Polaroids. Now, he says that he has 3 out of the 6 missing women's Polaroids, and by Polaroids he means Polaroids of them like before kind of anything happens, I think, after they're naked, and then after they're dead. And so he's basically saying that he has like, he says like he has 3, so that's 3, let's say, and then he has 3, but like he's saying that he has several Polaroids. And like he's saying, well, you know, he has other bits and bobs and stuff like that. And I don't really, is he saying I think he's saying that they're with a solicitor or something. Now, I don't know what solicitor is keeping stuff like that for you. But even then, like, I don't understand, like, because for Olsen to get any type of enjoyment out of them, he'd have to have them, he'd have to see them. And I can't imagine them being posted in, because all posts is checked. So I don't really know. Like, I would have been questioning that. Like, how do you have them? Because if they're in the prison has them. He would never have gotten them. And surely if they were just given straight away to a solicitor, like, then what's the point? You've never seen them. Like, they're no good to you. I don't really get it. I would have kind of questioned that. But anyway, they took this as you know, a good sign that, like, you know, our man Colin could have been responsible. Olsen said that all 3 of the women were buried in the same place, and he said that he would come and show them where it is once our Department of Justice confirmed for him in writing that we had no death penalty here. Now, we didn't, and Bailey said this to him, you know, like, we haven't had one since X amount of time, all this jazz. But I think he still wanted confirmation that he wouldn't be killed if he was to come over. He also said that there would be no handover of the photos until he knew his mate Colin was safe. So obviously there was a lot of back and forth, because obviously so I just realised I say obviously a lot. Alan Bailey was saying, I was going to say it there again, was you know, they needed to see the Polaroids. They needed something to show that this was real. So he was obviously saying, well, I'm not going to give them until I know Colin's safe for all this. So there was a lot of back and forth for a lot of months. So it obviously got to the point then where on a phone call they were discussing him coming. So Olsen was obviously talking about him coming to Ireland. And Bailey again said that they must see the photos first. And like basically as in like, there's no deal, this is not happening unless we see those photos. And there was just silence on the call for a minute or two. And then there was just like a tirade of abuse hurled at Bailey in English and in French. And then someone else came on, I'm guessing a prison officer, came onto the phone, apologised and hung up. So that was actually the last time that they spoke. And then a prisoner in the same prison actually came forward. And it turns out that he had worked in the library, so obviously he had more privileges, so he was allowed onto the internet and stuff like that. And one day, you know, just, I don't know what he was looking up, one day he came across like that, the Vanishing Triangle or the Operation Trace. So I don't really like the term Vanishing Triangle. I think it's very I don't know, is it like sensational or something? I don't know, but I try not to use it. But anyway, he found the Vanishing Triangle, Operation Trace, all that. And so obviously it seems like he kind of like looked up to Olsen, like, you know, like idolised him, because, you know, why wouldn't you? And so he, you know, mentioned this to him, I was telling him about it. And so then Olsen was like, get me more information, like find me everything you can about the, you know, Operation Trace, about the girls, about Ireland, about Wicklow, you know, about all this, like find me out as much as you can. And this is how he used all that information to the detectives. He apparently just wanted to come. He wanted to like leave Canada and get here. I don't know if it was a case that he thought. I think I read that he thought it would be easier here, like to get out on, parole and stuff, early release. Because obviously if he came here, he'd also be in on life, but we know our story with life. So I think he thought by coming here, he had more chance of actually getting back out into the real world. Whereas in Canada, he was in for 11 life sentences, like he wasn't going to be out. But that was kind of it. Nothing more came from Olsen anyway. But look him up. He doesn't even look like what I pictured him looking like when I was reading about him. But look it up, because like, to be honest, I didn't even read into it too much. I don't like looking at. I try not to look at cases with kids and stuff. But yeah, I just thought that was bizarre. The thing where that poor girl, is in the boot, and he has the audacity to be in trying to moan at the police about something else. So for the last hoax caller, I'm gonna have to read notes because it's actually quite a long, complicated story that I need to explain. And I saw someone, there was a comment about like, oh, that I need cue cards or something like that. So like, I always try say when I'm reading, because I apologize, because to be honest, it annoys me when I can see if I'm watching a video and someone is constantly just looking down. I do, like, if it's constantly kind of annoying, I'm like, just try read the story anyway. Yeah, so I apologize, because I know, do you know what I try? I think I find like I do it for like dates and stuff, or like if I'm listing stuff, I always feel like I need to read it because I'm afraid of getting something wrong that's like a factual thing, if that makes sense. As in, I don't want to get things like that wrong. But then when it's like the story mode, does that make sense? Anyway, so there was another hoax caller. And Barney Cummins, in his book Missing, he talks about it. And so he talked about it. He brought that book out in, I think, the early 2000s. And then he re-brought it out as in 2020, I think. It was definitely after 2018 anyway, because there's a mention of a crime from 2018 in the new book. And there's obviously extra stuff in it. But in both books, when he's talking about Operation Trace, he mentions this case. And then Alan Bailey in Missing Presumed also talks about him. So the crime that they both talk about, and they both talk about it in the same detail. So the crime happened, they're both talking about it. But Barry makes it sound like, right? I'll quote the book. We'll quote Barry. me, Barry. I wish Barry was me. So he makes it out like this person, the hoax caller, that they are in touch with the Gardai before the violent incident that makes him end up in hospital. So they say one of them was a teenage criminal from Athlone who would later be jailed for a most shocking crime. When he first contacted detectives from Operation Trace, the young man was serving a prison sentence and was also being treated at the Central Mental Hospital in Dundrum. He claimed he knew a man who was responsible for at least one of the disappearances he named 2 sites where he said Gardai might find evidence. The officers searched land near Clara in County Offaly and Kerrigan Bog just outside Athlone, but found nothing. The information provided by the teenager was no longer considered credible. Then he goes on to speak about the crime that I'm now going to tell you from Alan Bailey's point of view. But I'm just saying, Barry says it is in the early hours of the morning of the 30th of June 2001 and recently released from prison, and then talks about the crime. So he's saying June 2001. But Alan, he then says that basically they meet this guy in prison in December 2000. Now the story that I will tell you the story first, and then I'll continue, because I think I struggle myself to how to try to tell you this, because I was struggling to kind of understand it. So I'll tell you what the crime is, and then we'll go from there. So this guy, again, Barry Cummins says that he's a teenager, kind of, so he's coming into his early 20s, whereas Alan Bailey says he is 29 when they speak to him, and they speak to him in 2000. So again, there seems to be some stuff. They also, Barry Cummins doesn't mention it, and Alan Bailey does. It doesn't really matter, but that he is a settled traveller. He's a member of the travelling community. So again, one of them says that, one of them doesn't. In none of them is he named. So here's a little mission for you all. I cannot find any information on him, whatever. Like, no matter what I put into Google, I cannot find it. Neither of them named him, and I don't know why, because he's convicted of this crime. And I thought once you're convicted, that's it, you're named. So unless it's for some other reason, maybe because he was being treated in CMH, I don't know. But if you can find any information somehow that I missed, let me know. I'll buy you a pint. So anyway, in whatever time zone we're saying this happened, he was in Athlone, and there was a 17-year-old male who had gone in on his scooter. Now, they say scooter, I have to assume they mean an electric, or like a motorbike scooter, or an electric scooter, but I don't think we really had them then. And he went in to get chips in the town. And this is in the early hours, this is like 2 a.m. in the morning. And this guy jumps on the back of the scooter with a knife and basically forces him to drive. And they drive to loads of different places. He gets him to drive like that to Clara in Offaly, and then out to Kerrigan Bog. And when they get to the bog, he gets him to take off his shoes, and he gets him to take off his like jumper or his jersey or whatever, and he ties his hands with the shoelaces. He gags him with the top, and then he takes the chain off of the motorbike or the bike or scooter or whatever and ties his feet. He then pushes the 17-year-old into a bog hole, and then he pushes the scooter in on top of him, and then he says goodbye and good luck and heads back into town. Two Gardai come across this fella back in Athlone later on, and again, it's so late at night, and they know him because like that he has previous convictions. Both stories say that he has a lot of convictions. And so the Gardai are obviously like, well, Tom, like, why are you out? Like, what are you doing? And in Barry's book, so in Barry's book, he says, I've done it this time, now you'll believe me. So in that scenario, it makes it sound like he was nearly like crying for help when he told them, oh, I know a man who done this stuff or something, right? But again, it's still the case that he tells them. He says like what he just done, that he just abducted a guy, a teenager, like, and brought him up and done all this. And at first, like, the Gardai are kind of like, what? Like, they don't believe him. And so he's like, no, like, and he does. They drive him out. He brings them out to show him. So they pull up, headlights on, and they obviously get out and they can see him. The teenager's head, thankfully, it's like just his head is above the water or whatever. I don't really know what bog holes are, I'll be honest. I'll try to find information and put it up in the video. I kind of get the impression it's nearly like quicksand type of thing, that you're sinking in it and you're probably not supposed to really move. I don't know. But also the fact that the scooter is on top of him, he's not going to be able to get out, and his hands are tied, feet are tied. But his head is still up, thankfully, above the water. So they managed to, the two Gardai struggle obviously and managed to come out. During all this time, the guy is just leaning against the Garda car, just watching. And then apparently like that, after they get him out, he then kind of says, how much, like, how long will I get for this now, or something. So that's the crime he done. But I cannot find information. If I search kind of from his details, if I search from the teenager, I can't. Now, unless because the teenager, that's the reason they can't. Like, apparently the teenager was too traumatized to testify in court or anything. But your man got 12 years for this attack. But I think the only reason for a victim, like, there are reasons why a person won't be, like, if someone is abused by a relative or murdered by a relative or something like that, and as a child, and they're not allowed to be named, they won't name the person then, because they can't, because it could identify the child. But that's not the case. I don't think it's ever been mentioned that they were related. It just happens that that kid went in to get chips, and your man decided to hop on the back and torture him, basically. Now, like, loads of useful tips. Like, I know I'm telling you about the time wasters and stuff, but loads of useful tips did come in, obviously. People talking about people they know, probably talking about neighbours, this and all the dodgy people. But there was actually like women and all ringing in and reporting, not reporting, but basically talking about crimes that they didn't report. So like, they had been assaulted or raped by a boyfriend, an ex-partner, a stranger, someone they knew. And like, they obviously never reported them. They never wanted to go through that or whatever, for their own reasons, but that they felt like that they wanted to help. So that's why they were coming forward now, because if they felt like that person, their boyfriend, their ex-partner, neighbours, someone else they knew through someone, if they could help in any way to find a connection. So although the investigation began with 6 disappearances, more were added later on, and they decided to look at these as well. Eva Brennan was 39 and she went missing on the 25th of July 1993 from Rathgar Road in Dublin. Imelda Keenan was 22 and she vanished on the 3rd of January 1994 after leaving her flat in Waterford City. They then included 2 unsolved murders. Antoinette Smith from Clendalkin was 27 and she went missing on July 11th, 1987 after a David Bowie concert. They went into city centre after, and then she was last seen getting out of a taxi in Rathfarnham. Her body was found in April 1988 in the Dublin Mountains. Patricia Dardy was 29. She went missing on the 23rd of December 91 from Tallaght. She had been out Christmas shopping. Her body was found in June 1992 and it was eerily close to where Antoinette's had been found. So Professor Max Taylor of Applied Psych in the University of Cork, UCC, he looked at like the times, like when they all went missing. There was certain months they went missing. So they all went missing in either January to February, July to August, November to December, and then Annie was in March. But the rest of them were all Jan, Feb, July, August, November, December. Now whether that means anything, I don't know. I actually started to wonder if at first when I was looking at it, the whole February thing, there's like a midterm then, and then I was like, when's the next midterm in winter? But I think that's October, so that's not, yeah, don't mind me. Other things we looked at, like the days that they went missing, like the phases of the moon when they went missing, like they were just literally trying everything, investigating everything. There were searches in Leinster, Ulster and Connacht. They used sniffer dogs, graveyards were even searched. I think they got tip-offs kind of that graveyards could have been used. I mean, when we look back, that was used in Larry Griffin's case. Remember they said that they had put him into one of the graves. So there are basically, they already have essentially prime suspects for the murders of Ciara Breen, Fiona Pender and Fiona Sinnott. Unfortunately, there's just not enough evidence at the moment anyway to make arrests or to make convictions. The other cases are all still widely opened, and there are some suspects that the Operation Trace team did look at. In July 1999, 51-year-old John Crerar was arrested for the 1979 murder of 23-year-old Phyllis Murphy. Her body had been found 4 weeks later in Wicklow Mountains. He was a former soldier who had actually been a suspect at the time, but he had an alibi. There had been semen found on Phyllis's body, and obviously with advances in DNA then in 1999, his alibi then admitted that they had lied to help him out. Some people are just scum. No, they probably had the best intentions. They probably genuinely, if you genuinely believed that someone said, I just need an alibi so that they leave me alone or something. If you genuinely believed that person you knew couldn't be part of this, maybe, yeah, you'd be like, I'm just doing him a favour. But, I think you'd want to be questioned why someone you know was already being investigated for murder. In 2002, he was found guilty of Phyllis's murder. He actually had no previous convictions before this, and he had been a family man. Trace did look at him, but they could find no connections. So, this is an interesting one. In February 2001, Thomas O'Connor, he was the curator of the Dublin Civic Museum, and he was found guilty of stalking. The Gardai had been investigating this for 5 years. He terrorized at least 9 women, like, so single women or widows, right? With phone calls. He would phone and, like, obviously, like, breathe heavy, groan, grunt, all of this, right? He would send them, like, news articles about the missing women and kind of, imply, I think, like, you're next. He apparently sent one of them a letter with, like, feces in it. He was a married father of 2 from Boolastown in South Dublin, and in July 2002 he got 3 years for that. But again, they looked at him and they couldn't find any links to the cases that he was sending them. So speaking of family men, Larry Murphy, I'm not going to go into him because I've done a video on him, so you can have a look at that if you want. Again, no convictions, no previous convictions, no, he's a family man, never came to the attention of the Gardai, this type of thing. But look what he done. And I most certainly think that was not his first time. I told you that before in the video. Have a look. The next one is Robert Howard from Wolf Hill in County Leash. I think this is why he was nicknamed the Wolf Man, but also, look at him. He moved between Ireland and the UK. So obviously was allowed to kind of commit different horrific acts in both countries without being caught. So as a teenager, he was robbing houses here in Ireland. In 1965, he attempted to rape a child. In 1969, he raped a woman. In 1973, in Youghal, he raped a 79-year-old woman. In 1993, he abused a 16-year-old in his flat in Castledarg in Northern Ireland. For the rape of the woman in Youghal, he received 10 years and was deemed a dangerous psychopath. He was released in 1981. He was a suspect in the attempted abductions of children in Wicklow and Mayo. He is the main suspect in the disappearance and murder of 15-year-old Arlene Atkinson from Tyrone in Northern Ireland. She went missing in 1994. He knew her. He was going out with, like, her friend's mom, and so he was dropping them all to like a disco or something in I want to say in Enniskillen, but he dropped them and picked them up. I think maybe he stayed there, I don't know. But for some reason, like, he dropped the others back first and then dropped her, and then she was never seen again, but he has never been convicted. In the 90s then, he spent some time in the Midlands, where he was from, and in the southeast of Ireland. He was arrested in England then for the murder of 14-year-old Hannah Williams and received a life sentence for this. He died in prison then in 2015. There was a one-day conference between the Gardai, the PSNI, which is the police up the north, and the police over in England. Because like that, he went through, he just travelled so much kind of freely that they had a conference to kind of see if there was any other cases that they could connect him with. Regards the Operation Trace victims, they say that Howard was known to try infiltrate, or befriend, so he would befriend these women. Like that, he knew Arlene Atkinson, he knew Hannah Williams, through a woman. I assume that the child that he attempted to rape, again, he probably knew their parents. It seems like that's kind of part of his thing, his MO, or whatever you call it. It's probably even part of his enjoyment, that he likes to, gain the trust and stuff like this. Some of the mentions, I'm just going to read them out. So there was Michael Bambrick, right? So he was from Clendalkin, and he was arrested in May 1994 for the murder of his wife in September 1991, and of another woman, Mary Cummins, in July 1992. His daughter actually, I think, went to the police about him like that in 94. The thing is, they say he didn't drive, so it would have obviously made it harder for him to commit these kind of crimes. Then you have the lovely Graeme Dwyer, who murdered Elaine O'Hara in 2012. I am sure you know that case. It's one of the hugest cases, especially because there was aspects of BDSM, so it became a very sensational international case. He would have been in his 20s in the 90s, and Elaine O'Hara was found near Kilkenny, which is actually where Patricia Dardy was found. And at the time that at the time that Patricia Dardy would have went missing, or that she was murdered, he would have been 19. And then If you do know the case of Elaine O'Hara, Graeme Dwyer then mentioned in text stuff about Raynard Murray, who was a 16-year-old, 16, 17, 16, I think. She was murdered. She was stabbed to death very close to her home. And again, he would have been 26 when that happened. But again, he kind of like, what I think he was trying to like imply that he done it, or that. But again, like stuff like that has happened before. Like someone else, the guy that the Scissor Sisters killed, apparently he was saying that he had killed Raynard Murray. So I don't know what people's obsession are with saying that they killed Raynard Murray, but they are the ages that Graeme Dwyer was at the time. They have never found any connections, and if they have, they haven't reported on them. Oh, just to mention that Graeme Dwyer receives fan letters, and apparently some of them are X-rated, like the photos and all that he's getting, of topless women and stuff like that. Honest to God, look at your life, reevaluate your life. Another one is, Vincent Connell, who was a DJ. He had been arrested for the murder of Patricia Furlong, right? So she actually was found murdered in July 1982 in Glencullen. And if you remember, I said that that's where they think Annie McCarrick could have been out walking. So they also think she had been in Johnny Fox's, and Patricia had been at a festival that was quite close to Johnny Fox's, and she was found murdered. I just want to say actually as well, for all the cases that I'm saying about murdered, as far as I know, they were all strangled, and they were all strangled with like their own bra or a bag or something. Like there was never any other weapon used. Like no one brought rope or anything like this. It was always like an opportunity, a weapon of opportunity. Would you call it that? That they just used their bra, or they used their stockings or something like that to strangle them. Anyway, Vincent was arrested in 1990 for that, but then he served 5 years, and then the conviction was overturned because they said that his confession was under duress. So he was then free. He did later plead guilty then to the assaults on girlfriends from 1978 to 1989. Another one is I don't like saying another interesting one, but another one, Philip Colgan. So he raped 2 women in 1991 and was released before Deirdre Jacob vanished. So that's the only one he could actually, out of the Operation Trace women, that's the only one he could be responsible for if he was. Now, he would go on then in 1999 to murder Eva Brennan, and he hid her body in the Wicklow Mountains. So it's definitely a common area that murderers seem to use. If you remember the video I done for the body in the suitcase, like they wanted to bring his body to the mountains, they just didn't have a car. So it definitely is. So I don't know if we can just assume, because these bodies are found in the mountains, that they're definitely the same person, because it definitely seems like it's just a free-for-all up there. It's probably a very morbid thing to say, but I know, like, me and my friends know, if you were up in the mountains or whatever, you would, like, you'd be saying, like the amount of probably dead bodies that are up here, or not just even these women, but like other things, and like the amount of dead bodies, because it's such, obviously if you're not from Ireland, like it's just so much like greenery, hedgerows, grass, bogs, everything. So it would just be very hard to like go. They'd literally have to cut everything down, I think, to go in if they were to do it that way. And I don't know if they're allowed to do that, because there's certain grass and stuff that they're not allowed to cut because of the little like hedgehogs and stuff. But yeah, I know we always kind of like, it's so scary, like the amount of bodies that are, when you're driving through the Wicklow Mountains or something. Anyway, morbid thought. So by December 2001, there was no clear links established between any of the cases or any suspects. The team was reassigned, and the cases went back to the original Garda stations for them to continue the investigations. The database is still updated. So, for example, in 2018, Justine Valdez was murdered by Mark Hennessy, and so that would have been updated into the system. Her victimology, and then also him as a possible suspect. And they did then look at him, I think, for other cases. He became known as the Beast of Bray, I think was where he was originally from, so the Beast of Bray. But there was no links. Nothing was found kind of to connect Mack to any of them, and if it is, they haven't released it. Between 98, like the end of 98 and the end of 2001, when the investigation was going on, there were no more disappearances. Nothing happened. We know Larry Murphy done his crime in 2000, and we believe maybe he was involved in other ones. To be honest, the investigation was so such a huge thing, right? That I don't think they're not gonna continue. Like, if they can control the urges, they're not gonna. Sorry, I don't know if I said it earlier about John Crewer, because he got away with the case for so long. They kind of think that he could have been involved in others, because if you got away with it, you wouldn't be able to hold those urges for another 20 years because you thought you got away with it, you know? So, yeah. But again, if you were able to hold the urges and you knew the investigation was going on and you didn't want to draw attention to yourself, or like that, by then, did someone like that, did they die? Did they get incarcerated for something else? We know they all kind of say about Larry Murphy being arrested in 2000 and that there was none after that. But yeah. By the time the end of Operation Trace, there was 7,500 people in the OVID database. There had been 5,000 witnesses, interviews, and 4,000 statements taken. The original team, and even now the police now, they believe really at this stage that the only way for these cases to be solved are like that, if allegiances are broken. Like, loyalties change over the years, people die, you know. So, like, if someone gave a false alibi, like in the case of John Creer, if someone has given a false alibi for someone, they need to come forward and, you know, and tell the truth. Or like, again, like the police were kind of saying, like, if you do think that a neighbour or someone you know or something had acted strange, you just never acted on it, just to, you know, report it. I just remembered. I kind of explained it in the Mabel case, and so I'll just explain it now, and then I won't have to explain it in kind of the individual cases. There are suspects in certain cases. I mentioned that earlier, right? And sometimes I think people think I don't know the case or something, and then because it's clearly blah blah blah, you know. We have defamation here, so I can't just be like, yeah, no, it was Tom done them all, you know, without any sort of proof. So even if you listen to other podcasts and stuff on the cases, they won't necessarily name them because they can't. So I'm not saying I don't know. Chances are, if you're saying it's obviously blah blah blah, chances are I also think it's obviously blah blah blah, but I just can't say it. And unfortunately, at the moment, there's just not the evidence to do it, and it's really sad. It's really frustrating. So that is basically the story of Operation Trace. It is really one of the biggest kind of investigations we've had. I would think that some of the cases are connected. I'm hoping over the next few months to give the time and focus to each case to be able to do that. But I thought it was best to maybe kind of just give an overview of each one, and then that way, if people only want to watch this one, then that's fine. Or you can, if you haven't heard of the cases, or you want to look at more information or something, then you can look at those cases. I'm hoping to also include maybe people that I think could be connected, but they're probably not. But I'd rather keep an open mind and include extra cases and have a look at it that way. Yeah. Is there a point of me even apologising at this stage for the delay? I put up a little thingy on YouTube. I'm still getting used to how to use it all, but I put up a little thingy just to say, basically, I went back to work just nearly 2 months now. We're near the end of March, so I went back the end of January, and obviously I had to put my baby into crash. I didn't know, but I know now that they have no immune systems, so they catch everything. They catch everything. And obviously with COVID and everything going on, it's even worse. So like it's constant. Like it's not even like when you're sick. Like you have to constantly make sure that they're drinking and hydrated and all this stuff. Anyway, so the baby has caught 3 viral infections, just over the 3rd one now, and I caught the last one. No, sorry, I caught the second one. So I was bad, and then obviously I'm in work now, so I had to keep doing antigen tests to make sure they're negative and all this. And I remember at one point I was going into the pharmacy on Paddy's Day with my mask and all on, apologising because I needed a cough bottle, and I'm like trying to be like, I tested negative, you know, because I just felt like everybody's like, why are you out in public if you have COVID? Like, I don't have COVID. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, so I just haven't, between being back at work, between being sick, between having a sick baby, and between having a baby, and just other stuff in general, I suppose. Like, I hate not doing the video. I really do. I hate, like, it really bothers me when I'm not doing the videos. But I also don't want to do half-arse jobs. I've said that before. So, yeah. I'm not asking for, in terms of the cases, I'm not asking for you to like tell me non-true, like non-factual stuff or like rumours. But if you happen to be from like those areas or something, and you grew up or you lived there at that time, if there's any information you think you can give me in terms of, like, just for an example, like how often the bus would have went, you know, this type of thing, just so I can get a better idea and context of the times, because like I'm only a young one. No, just because obviously I'm not from the area and I wasn't living there at the time, so it would be better. It would just help, you know what I mean? If or even just point me that way. Anyway, if you can find out the other case, let me know, and there's a pint in it for you. And yeah, that's kind of it, I think. I hope you're all well. I really am. I really do. The world is a lot different than the last time we spoke. Yeah, like the world is just crumbling, isn't it? I hope you're all still staying safe, and I hope you're all mentally staying well as well, because it's just so much, and it's just seems to be one thing after another at this stage. So yeah, I hope you like this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think any of those suspects could be involved. If there's anything I've missed, I apologise, and please let me know. Please let other people know below. Yeah, and I hope to be back sooner. I'm better, I think. Sometimes I sound like I'm still a bit dodge, but yeah, hopefully. So I shall see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.